Well, here we are. I can't believe it. Rolling line multiplayer is actually finally truly a thing. This is something that I absolutely sort of just dreamed of. I never knew if I'd actually work on multiplayer or not. It always just seemed like such a big job that realistically wasn't probably going to ever happen. And I guess at some point I finally decided it was worth giving it a go. And I have spent a lot of time this year getting everything ready and sort of testing things out, and not too long ago I officially announced that rolling line multiplayer was actually happening. And now, with a private beta going on and just much more news coming out about it, I can start properly talking about what multiplayer is like and what it's going to be. And right here we already have a little example of a character. I'm just operating on a second monitor with another copy of the game running, and I can just sort of switch between these two and give you an example of what multiplayer is actually like. So I'll go through sort of each step of it, various different parts of multiplayer, and explain in a bit more detail how they work. Starting off with how you actually drive trains around in the cab. So here's an example of being inside the cab of a train and how you can control all the usual stuff you normally would, but in multiplayer. Now I'll have to tab between two different copies here because I'm controlling both of these at the same time in different windows. But as you can see, each player can individually control all these different things, and that is all synced over the network. And they can even control the speed at the same time in the cab. You know, we can walk over here and start mucking with the speed, and that is synced between everyone. Basically, the way it works is that the last person to touch the speed will set it to something, and all other players receive that information. So no player is technically like owning the speed and controlling the speed from their end. They're just giving instructions to the server to set the speed to a certain amount, and the server also keeps track of who the last person to set the speed was. So for example here, if I let this character set the speed, then actually hop out of this train, I'll be able to see the name of the person driving it. And I can change that. If I select this, I take over, and they are no longer controlling it, because I am now. As you would guess, you can also walk around on trains, just as you can in single player, and this is all synchronized in multiplayer as you would hope. So I can run around and jump, do all this sort of stuff, and that will all be synced properly. And this works where you can have people in the cab on one part of the train, you can have people down the back of the train, the caboose, and they can all interact with each other and sort of, you know, give instructions and all that sort of thing. And with voice chat you can talk to each other and give instructions, or just point and gesture. Yeah. There they go. In terms of gestures, there is a new gesture menu which you bring up by pressing G, and then you can choose from a bunch of animations, and your character will actually pop into third person to sort of show you doing these animations, which is kind of nice. And obviously other people can see you doing this, and there's not many of them at the moment, but obviously there'll be more by the time the multiplayer update actually fully comes out. You can also, of course, see each other in large scale. So, you know, you can run around on the map, but you can also operate just as if you were dealing with the layout in normal scale. So you can push wagons around, pick them up, place them on the tracks, all that sort of stuff. And of course, that's all synced in multiplayer, everyone can see you doing it. So you can have multiple people all shuffling around on a yard, moving things about, controlling trains. And when you're in miniature scale, you can also see these players up in large scale. You can turn this off, but by default, yep, you can see them all running around and doing things and interacting with the map, which can be quite surreal and quite funny. especially when you've got a lot of people all doing a lot of stuff in one place. Let's have these giants walking around interacting with the world in front of you. And that goes both ways as well, so a player in miniature can, you know, be standing down like this. Actually, hang on, I will go into large scale here and then get the other player to run down into the view. You can probably see them down there, hopping around on top of the wagons. Yeah, would you look at that? It's amazing. Definitely one of the more unique features of Rolling Line multiplayer, this bizarre size dynamic of how some players are giants walking around the map and other players are running around in miniature on freight wagons. Loading and unloading also is fully synchronized in multiplayer. So basically the server has control of what trains are being loaded and what's being loaded onto them, and as things get added on, it will send that information off to the clients. So I'm basically seeing the train get loaded at the moment, but the server is the one figuring that all out, and it's being sent to everyone who is joining. So the other player here watching is seeing the same thing as me. And individual players can also open the loading menu for any freight wagon and add things to it, and then that will be sent to the server. So basically loading is shared between everyone, everyone can see the changes, but each individual person has the ability to edit loads and have that then get sent to the server. But the actual loading mechanisms, like the log loaders, all operate on the server. But I'll quickly show you here that this player over here can open up the loading menu and add something in, and then close the loading menu, and that has now been updated. You can now see this big log here was added on by that player, and I can open up the loading menu as well and remove it, and that will be updated for everyone. All the other interactable stuff that you would expect is also synced in multiplayer, so things like light sources can be turned on and off, and that is all synchronized, as well as like opening doors. So like I can pop these doors open, and you know, everyone can now see that now, and those doors will no longer block the other players. And you know, they can hop onto a train, start controlling it, blow the whistle, all that sort of stuff. You can also see things like turntables, where, you know, this player in miniature can enable the turntable, and then everyone else will see that moving. You can even see the player running around on it. And for a more interesting example, multiplayer can also handle circuitry. This was probably the most complicated thing to get working, but it's really worth it because the amount of interesting stuff you can do using circuitry in multiplayer is just amazing, and it makes me so excited to think that you can actually have circuits operating in multiplayer and just the sort of stuff that people will actually be able to do with that. So like this example here, this is a sort of keypad passcode thing that I made a while back to demonstrate how you could use circuits and logic gates. And if we zoom in on this, I will switch over to the other player, and they can flick these switches, and let's see, what's the passcode? 4589. So I can activate 4589, and now that was all synchronized in multiplayer. Either one of us can throw the switch, I'll throw the switch, and these doors have opened, and that is now synchronized for everyone. So already that's just an example of how you could have a locked door passcode system that operates fully in multiplayer. But there are far more complicated examples out there, like people are already making big switchboards for operating their railway tracks, so things like signal control and turnout control. And for the most part, that will actually work in multiplayer. You do reach a bit of a issue eventually where the circuits are trying to send out so much information over the network that the network can't actually handle it. So, for example, say you've got a signal board that updates 1,000 signals in one frame, like all at once, that's just not going to work in multiplayer. A lot of that information is going to be lost because it's just far too much information to send over the network. And in the future, I may actually look at some really advanced solutions to that, things like queuing up all that information to make sure that everything eventually gets to the server. But at least for now, the implementation of multiplayer circuitry works pretty well right up until you sort of reach gigantic circuits. So stuff like this works really nicely, and most of the testing I've been doing has been working really well for even those big signal boards. But I'm very curious to see how people use this. Like, the circuitry in multiplayer really opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Another thing to demonstrate is the chat menu and voice options. So if you press T, you get this new set of options. You have a bunch of settings relating to voice and name display and all that sort of stuff. You have your classic player list where you can see who's hosting, and in this case I'm hosting, and I can mute or kick other players. You can see the ping, all that sort of stuff. And over in text chat you can of course send messages like hello, and that will pop up for everyone. You might not be able to see it, it's down in the corner. You can also toggle this auto open chat, which just means that, you know, every time you press T it'll automatically open this up. Hey, hello, help. Yeah, and of course the other player can also open the chat window. I'm just going to switch over to the other window and do that now, and then they can reply. Hi, how are you? Brilliant. Multiplayer. And that's pretty much the bulk of it. Obviously there's so many more just minor elements of multiplayer. Like, basically think that every single aspect of the game that involves some form of interaction or movement synchronization had to be redesigned in some ways for multiplayer, and at minimum it would just be sending information over the network to update the state of something, but other stuff actually required a full redesign, because the way I'd programmed it in the past was just completely not considering multiplayer functionality. So it has been quite a big job, and there's still quite a lot more to go. But the basics are working really well, and it is honestly just so amazing to see this game working in multiplayer. It's something I never really imagined could happen. And I still just absolutely love seeing a little character sitting on the side of a train. There's something so interesting about it. So I reckon when this comes out, everyone will have a really good time with it. I'm quite excited to see just how much this affects the game's community and how people play it and just how people interact with the game in general. Like, multiplayer operation sessions are just something quite special, and it really sort of changes what you can do with the game. Obviously the main restriction is that map editing is not supported. Like, you basically, if I grab an edit tool, you'll see what I mean. If I have an edit tool in my hand and then do edit details, I'll get a warning saying that, you know, edit tool can't be used in multiplayer. That's because synchronizing map editing is such a gigantic job. Basically I had to make a choice early on of whether I was going to attempt map editing in multiplayer, and at least for now I decided to just stick to train operations. So I wanted to get a functional version of the game with train operations done so that people can play it and start making the most of it. And in the future I'll start looking at how to possibly do map editing, because map editing is going to be so much more complicated. Like, it definitely scares the hell out of me, the concept of programming this game with map editing. Making a multiplayer map editor is probably one of the harder things you can do in game development, especially with a game like this that is 8 years old worth of old programming and old systems. I really do not look forward to trying to get that to work in a multiplayer setting. But it may happen. I won't make any promises, but it definitely might happen. It's something I really would love to add. Like, just having multiplayer map building would be an incredible thing to be able to do. That would just be so exciting. like the potential for multiplayer map projects where everyone is working together on the same map is just so exciting, and I'm sure sooner or later I'll have a go at doing it. But at least for now, you can do multiplayer map operations. You can have a whole group of people all driving trains together and working together on the same map, which is pretty damn exciting. And I'm really keen to get this out for everyone and sort of see what people think of it, and start seeing proper servers full of people. And yeah, exciting times for Rolling Line right now. But yeah, thank you for listening.